searched the world over and thought I found true love. You met an AI and poof, you was gone.
Welcome, everybody. This is another episode of You Teach the Machines. I am Jeff Pennington. My co-host is
MJ Pennington.
And today we are joined by our guest, Gretchen Andrew.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. I saw Gretchen's bot email in my junk folder. I looked up and said, hey, if you're real, what do you think about a conversation? Gretchen got right back and said, 100% human, love to chat. And we had a lovely intro conversation. And now here we are.
Yes, here we are. We're all completely real.
We're all human.
Gretchen, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about yourself, how you got to the point in your life that you're at?
Yeah, of course. So I studied information systems at university and got what were, especially at the time, deemed to be very good jobs out of school. I worked for Intuit through school, and then I got a job at Google in 2009. They were still doing the 18 interviews at the time. Flew me out from Boston twice my senior year of college, sort of an absurdity and part of their hiring arc. And I got there and became pretty disillusioned with the culture around the tech industry. What I saw, this hugely interesting potential tool of education and societal transformation and personal transformation, primarily being used to sell us things we don't need and manipulate our attention and surveillance. So before I got too strongly connected to any sort of lifestyle, I decided to leave and decided that I was going to use the internet to transform myself into an artist. At the time, everyone's like, oh, but you don't know how to do that. You don't know anybody. The art world is very insular. And I just thought, okay, I'm pretty sure me plus the internet can figure this out. Over the past decade or so, I've built up a career. I'm in the Whitney's permanent collection now. I've exhibited all over the world at some pretty massive venues in major collections. And my work really does tie in my experience in the tech industry, my knowledge from having studied algorithms, and really is about making what is usually invisible in technology visible so that we can talk about it and understand it. I've been working a lot with beauty standards. And then through this work, I've also encountered a lot of interesting problems that don't manifest themselves as paintings. And so most recently, I've started Intelligent Attribution, which is a company that particularly looks at how journalism and media is being destroyed by AI. Its business model is being destroyed by AI, and has found a handful of very clever solutions around paid media, around affiliate, around subscription, because journalism has always been funded indirectly. People, pay for something else. They pay for events, they pay for sponsored posts, they pay for brand content, and that money goes to sending people to foreign countries as war correspondents. That's most recently what my team and I have been diving into, is trying to get ahead of a lot of these. I just read the statistic that so of the industries where search is being disrupted the most, number one was healthcare, number two was education, number three was media and journalism. And these are the percentages of search that now result in an AI answer where the person does not go to a website at all. We've been working with a bunch of publications around the world. We're helping them make more money instead of less money because of AI, keeping them in the business of producing unique content, but also not making it a requirement that people end up on your website, because that's really the part that's going away. The value hasn't gone away.
That's been become really apparent to me just in my personal life, my personal use of information that I navigate on the web. I switched to DuckDuckGo because there's just less of an intermediary between me and the primary information that I want to get to. As I watched the generative results from Google change over about 18 months to include links instead of just a block of generated, could be right, could be wrong information. And, the thesis of the work that MJ and I do is, no, this is our information. This is these models are incorporating data, text, images, art, science from us into their models. I wonder how, behind the curtain, these companies are discussing, if at all, the sort of undermining of human creativity and potential by stepping in between. And so you're doing the work with Intelligent Attribution now to try and figure that out. And if I could segue back to your transformation, just your discovery of yourself as an artist.
I had a question about that too.
You go,
I was
MJ.
like, everything that you just said is like kind of ties into the thesis of what we do. It's like how do we connect to the humanity of the art that's out there? How are we keeping everything that we do with technological innovation people-centered? Because at the end of the day, are we just concentrating wealth at the top? And like you said, using these algorithms to capture people's attention and sell them more things that they don't need? Or are we using them to increase access to knowledge and, like you did, transform yourself into an artist? I just wanted to go back because there's like so many questions I have and I'm trying to keep a clean line of questioning and thought. But so, okay, you started working at Google in 2009. How long were you there for?
I was there for less than 2 years.
Okay. So back in 2009 to 2011, that was before sort of like the AI bubble in more recent times, but you were already sort of disillusioned with what was happening in the tech world, what sort of the goals of the big tech companies at the time were, and you sought art instead. Can you just like go into a little bit more detail about like what you were seeing at the time, 2009 to 2011? Did you see all of this coming? Were there whisperings? Also, where did art come from? Had you been interested in art before?
It wasn't AI at the time, but whatever else it was, right? Google was trying to launch a social media platform called Google Plus, which does not exist anymore. Whereas I think what's happened in social media is so interesting because I know a lot of parents who won't let their kids have TikTok or Instagram, but they let them have YouTube. And YouTube is absolutely no different, right? It is absolutely social media. So what Google should have done at the time is double down on YouTube as a social network and not try to create Google Plus to compete with Meta and Twitter and everything going on at the time. So this is just to say that the technologies were different. I mean, I fell in love with the tech industry during the don't be evil time, and the idea that there was still a uniqueness to working in tech. It was still full of geeks. And what I think happened in 2008 with the financial crash and the banking crisis is all of the top students who would have gone into iBanking decided to go into tech, and the companies became full of high achieving people who just were following the money and the success and not necessarily the unique culture that I think had existed around tech. Like you had to be particularly interested in it to pursue it. Prior to that, like if you had a job at Goldman and a job at Google, everyone would take the job at Goldman. And so that I think that was an interesting cultural and sort of industry shift as well that was going on around the time that I was formally joining the tech industry. I'd worked for Intuit since 2006 as have part-time during the school year and full-time during the summer. I think one of the things that I'm very curious about is post 2008, the job market was in an extremely interesting place. What did you find when you were leaving school? I mean,
I was going to interject and I was trying to fight it, but I'm glad that you asked.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I know, again, it's a different set of things, but such interesting forces.
I almost feel like sort of what happened with my class was the reversing of what you just described. I think in a lot of ways, tech became going into a tech career. And I'm not saying that it is completely free of people who are just passionate and interested in tech and kind of geeky and excited about innovating and learning computer science. But a lot of people went into tech because it became if you work really hard, if you learn all the skills, a super lucrative career where you can go into tech, you can make a lot of money. There's a lot of stability. You're sort of told that like this will always be around, right? There's all this innovation happening. And so like maybe the people that would have gone into banking in your class year ended up that like demographic of people started to merge into going into tech and going into computer science too, looking for a lucrative, stable career. And I think that kind of what happened with my class year and the couple class years after me, like this like current job market is that kind of fell on its head and reversed a little bit. Like it didn't necessarily become that if you just worked really hard and learned all of your computer science and wanted to become a software engineer, now those jobs are largely going away, and it's really hard to get hired entry level at a lot of these big firms, and they're cutting the workforce. And so it almost, to me, feels like it backslid. Not that those people went back to investment banking, but it was like, it became clear that if you had that sort of geeky interest and passion and foundational curiosity about how what these things mean for society, what these things mean for how you can be creative and innovate, then you had a leg up. And it isn't just like cut and dry, learn the skills, become a software engineer anymore. And my class was kind of like right at the cusp of that. So a lot of people were computer science majors intending to go into software engineering and struggled to find those jobs.
So if I could ask a clarifying question, MJ, it's shifted, or there are no absolutes here, but where like the place on the spectrum shifted back toward people who had more of that specific interest in innovation and creativity were the people that would pursue a job in technology, less the, okay, if I get this degree, I'll have, 5 offers fall of my senior year.
I think that's true. Yeah. I think that for my batch of new grads and people entering the workforce, just having skills on paper doesn't get you where it used to, because so much of that can be done by AI, like coding and simple automated tasks and Excel sheets and things like that. So what becomes our value add is our ability to be creative and come up with solutions to problems and use the tools, but like have the bigger picture in mind, which I think is kind of cool when you're talking about how like a lot of you got disillusioned by tech because a lot of people ended up in tech who are just looking for money and stability, and maybe it slid away from the like more intrinsically curious and innovative and geeky people. And I think we might be going back there. Like, in order to be successful in tech now and in that sort of innovation, I mean, and I'm not saying at the big tech companies but like startups that are using tech in really creative ways, I think that part of the workforce is going to become more composed of people who are really genuinely interested in solutions.
I think the whole question of stability is really interesting here and does relate to some of the other questions you were asking. One of the things we're finding with intelligent attribution and working with media companies is this intensity of this trend where people are not trusting companies, they're not trusting brands, they're trusting individuals. And this comes through to some extent in the influencer world, but also we now have star journalists who jump from the Washington Post to the New York Times to their own Substack. They don't need the authority of an institution in the way that people used to. AI really respects the authority of individuals who have been able to build themselves up over time. So, the internet respects me because I go on podcasts, because I publish in major publications, because I've published certain academic research. And I don't think it was as real at the time. I think it's real now, but something I very much felt when leaving Google is that I wanted my reputation to be independent of Google's reputation. And that meant financially, that meant ethically, and I think that what we're seeing is a lot of people who took very safe jobs in tech when I did, who have now completely lost their jobs, who don't have networks outside of the large companies they've worked for a long time. Their careers might not even really exist anymore. And they're looking at me who's struggled through my 20s and 30s to get where I am. And they're saying, oh, how do I find my passion and figure out how to get paid for it? And I'm like, well, it is often not a quick process. Like, I'm curious about how your cohort looks at stability it definitely through the lens of AI and what AI is doing to the job market and the world.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I have a good answer or the right answer or any answer at all, but I can try. I think that in general, my age group is complete, and I might just be projecting, this might just be my personal opinion, but completely disillusioned with the structures and the establishment. And that kind of goes across everything. That's like the big companies that have been in charge of our economy, the government, it hasn't really worked out. And we feel super pessimistic. It feels like everything that was set in place to set us up and these structures and these establishments exist so that society keeps turning and we are protected by them and we get good health insurance from our employers and we work for these big companies and they care about us.
Your hour of code thing.
Yeah. So, okay, this is like a whole tangent that I could go on, but my entire life, we were told by these big companies that invested in education, invested in AP computer science, put Chromebooks in classrooms, right? Like gave us access to all this technology. And I'm not saying that that wasn't useful for our education, but we were sold over and over and over again, go into tech, do your hour of code, become a software engineer, work at these big companies, we will take care of you, you will have healthcare. There's generation after generation of people that were churned into these big tech companies. And then at the end of the day, when we graduated, those tech companies the entire time had been innovating away from needing human workers, right? Like they had been working towards this. And so when it comes to stability, I don't think that there is any collective understanding of what stability means for my generation. I know a ton of people who graduated and started and went right into AI startups, like came up with an idea and started innovating with AI. And I don't think that what they did is any less stable or certain than what I'm doing. Yeah, I guess we don't have an answer, but I think that the attitude of my generation is a little more like, well, we don't know, right? Like none of these establishments that were supposed to help us out meant that we're going to be successful. So like hard work in the traditional sense where you like take all these really hard classes and end up with a computer science degree and work at a big tech company, that it doesn't necessarily lead to a stable, successful, healthy, happy life. So like, why do I need to just sell my labor to a big company with the assumption that I will end up stable when that doesn't seem to be the case? I don't know what stability means for us, but I think it means that people my age are a little more willing to just like take some risks because it doesn't seem like it's necessarily productive or certain to go with the traditional route. Oh, one more thing. I also think a lot of people are interested more in like doing tangible things, like a lot of people in like healthcare professions and like nursing and trades. Like I know a lot of people my age who are very passionate, who chose those professions, who are very passionate about the fact that like these are the types of things that will always be around. I went and I work in a union and I'm an electrician and I make good money and we will always need that, which I think is interesting because for so long we got like pushed away from doing things with in the real world.
Yeah, I think that's sort of how I've seen it too. Like there's a feeling that we're not going to, at any level of our careers, buy into false security, but there's still a lack of where that security could be coming from, right? We know where it's not. And even with our companies, right, like we've built this incredible product with Intelligent Attribution. Granted, we have a Cornell educated undergrad and CTO working with Claude, but in any other time we'd have to have a team of 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And this company came out of a marketing business that I was running, and there was this time where about 6 months, every new client coming to me had built their website with AI, but it broke instantly anytime you tried to do anything, or they were launching a new product and they'd made it with AI, and like, that was rookie. But here we are, like there's 3 of us at the company now. We're all like just about 40 or a little bit above. And in each of our departments of what we do, we would need to have hired 3 or 4 people of your generation to do this. And our professed goal is to save journalism and indirectly to save democracy by saving journalism. Like, we talk about it in that civilization level terms.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like, we're not hiring at the rate that we would be previously. And we're super aware of that.
Yeah.
What we're finding is what you need is a sales channel. And that's where, it's so easy to build right now that the reason why we're getting the traction we are is one of our partners and one of our advisors is currently at Forbes. And while we have seen in the market that we have something really unique for publishers, what isn't scaling is human trust, human relationships. We have our CTO has another company that does technology for care facilities, for like rehab, and any time where payments need to be split across sort of a chaotic upfront out of network payment. And he's worked with some family members who are in that industry, and that's getting great traction. But it's because I guess how these things go to market, I think is very complicated in the environment. But if you have somebody on your team who's in the industry, who can sell into the industry that you're selling into. That's where I see there being a lot of experience that AI can't replicate.
A big chunk of that are the relationships that person has developed. And, I don't want to doom and gloom on your generation too much, Mary Jane, but, for a long time, the interpersonal relationships in the real world were degraded by digital intermediaries, social media, COVID. Yeah. Hiring via LinkedIn exclusively, right? Like, if you want to get a job, you gotta have your LinkedIn profile primped. And
nauseous.
Yeah. And so, that was yet another, like, yeah, if you just do these things using these accessible digital tools, then you can get a job. But that's not the case now.
Science degree, get on all the social media, connect with people digitally, and you will be set for life.
Right. But that's not the case. So it was I keep using this phrase, digital intermediary. It's like, basically you get a screen in between you and another person instead of you and another person speaking in real life. Coming back around to the MJ's generation not being hired by the startups.
Yeah, I have on that too.
Yeah, that and I can hear some regret in your voice, Gretchen, that your work in working to solve an incredibly important problem, which is the continued existence of independent journalism. You have regret that you're contributing to another problem, which is a lost generation.
My take on that is, like we were saying, the necessity for capital up front for payroll is no longer a barrier to starting a company, to having an idea, to delivering it at scale, to coming up with solutions. And previously, that necessity for capital came, you had to be some big company, you had to be private equity backed, you had to have all of these like connections in that world. And it's not like those companies are taking care of us now either. Like Google and other big companies, like mass layoffs, not hiring entry-level employees either. And so I guess my take on that is like entry-level jobs in general are, if not going away, at least changing in a lot of ways. And if the companies that have the opportunity to get on their feet and get going are gonna rival sort of the existing establishment of massive private equity backed companies, that gets me excited. I don't hear the fact that you don't have a couple of Gen Z employees doing sort of the legwork and like resent the fact that that's what we've come to. I hear we have a startup with a really cool idea that rivals the existing structures of journalism and tries to solve a really interesting problem. And we can do that because of the tech enablement that we have. And we don't have to like wait until we have all this capital. And like, I think about all of the ideas that people have that can pop up and rival these big techie crazy companies. And yeah, I don't know. I think that it is important that we start to disrupt the status quo, and the fact that anybody can have an idea now and get running with it without needing the capital. Like AI is here. AI is replacing a lot of the automated entry-level work. That's just the truth. And if it means that like the economic landscape can change because you don't need the capital to start, I think that that's a good thing. I don't think that's bad.
There's two things I want to dive into there. The first is, I have a friend who, he's an engineer, has a couple companies that he owns and has worked on. And he recently got approached by someone sort of at the intersection of venture capital, private equity, saying, we want to see what you're working on. And so he showed them this, he showed them that, he showed them four different companies that he's part of. And they said, we'd like to make an investment in something you're doing, but we'd want you to be doing it full time. We'd want you to have your entire focus on one thing. And he said, like as if you do that in private equity, as if anybody, and he's an engineer who now has Claude Code and is like, these companies are all growing at their own pace. There are other conditions that will make them grow or not. And while the context switching, I think, is quite a lot, I think the idea that only the banker is somebody that places many bets is kind of unfair. So I think as creators, we can have a portfolio as well.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. This is something I'm exploring in my own life. So I was of the establishment for a long time. I worked at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for 17 years, which is, a tenure unheard of in sort of working in technology. I was all in on one thing with one organization. And now I'm, partly because of my interest, I'm doing what I can to have like a bunch of balls in the air. What might go from project to side hustle to something significant. And your point that the bankers get to place all the bets and everybody else is expected to never see their family by being hyper focused on that one thing it's another example of the disruption that I think MJ's getting at, which is, if it's never been easier to start something, that may disrupt.
They want us all focused on one thing. They want us all focused on one thing and never seeing our families and locked into the establishment, bro.
Yeah. But if starting a company has never been easier, and that starting a company could disrupt, one of these establishment organizations that can't change as fast, that's awesome. If having the ability to, pursue 3 or 4 different ventures at the same time through the use of, automation means that you don't have to sell yourself to an investor
or put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, then that's that. I mean, that disrupts legacy model of venture and growth capital. That's different. And I'd like to get into specifics on what attribution means. You've been doing something that I started doing about 3-4 years ago for a lot longer, which is kind of have my own voice in the world and not have my voice be entirely through the PR bottleneck of the company I work for. But that voice, whatever value it may have to an individual, there are massive forces at work that are doing everything they can to capture all of the value for themselves, and I don't see any of it. I just get to be, I just get to have an audience, or I just get to have a following, or I just get to have listeners, right? But I don't get paid. How does attribution, hey, this person created this art, this person created this information, this knowledge, this piece of writing or video. How does attribution disrupt what the sort of legacy establishments have taken us?
Yeah. So to start with, I call this the frozen bagel problem, where when you ask AI, what's the best toaster for a frozen bagel? AI will give you a variety of toasters because Forbes has written an article about this, because Consumer Reports maybe has written an article about this. People with real human mouths who have bought bagels and bought toasters have put the bagel in the toaster and seen what happens and written about why these toasters are the best. If you go to AI strips all of that information from Forbes and says, this is the best toaster for you, go to Amazon to buy it. Buy it directly at Target. What happens in that is previously you'd go to the Forbes article, you'd click on the toaster, you'd buy it on Amazon, and Forbes would get some affiliate revenue back from that. That's what funded the content creation. That's what funded the mouths. That's what funded the bagels. That's what funded the toasters. But now that's entirely cut out because AI just takes the information and sends you direct to the merchant. What we do here is we work entirely within the set logic of AI. AI has a huge structural preference for commerce. The majority of the internet has been created to sell us stuff. So that's what's been used to educate the internet. And some of our sort of tenets of how we've built intelligent attribution is we don't rely on the AI companies to play ball. We don't rely on the AI companies to do the ethical or to the good thing for the information structure. We entirely say what is cheapest and best for the AI companies and how do we align that with the interests of journalism. So with our affiliate product, the way that we align that is we turn Forbes into what's called the merchant of record. So now, so instead of taking the information from Forbes and sending you to Target to buy the toaster, we've changed it so that AI takes the information from Forbes or what PC Mag or this podcast or this individual, blogger, this person with their own Substack, and say, if this information about this thing is coming from here, this is also where you buy it. And we route people through the publisher so that they act as the merchant. They're not the fulfiller. Amazon or Target or Walmart or whoever is still the one fulfilling the product. But we change it so that they become still the attributed source that gets that revenue. So really, media is not disrupted here. Media gets to keep doing the same thing that they've been doing, but they get to continue to get paid for it, which is one of our solutions. Another is our paid media product, where people will pay to have an article published on. So it's $5,000 a day to have an article, sponsored content article on the digital homepage of the Khaleej Times, which is the biggest newspaper in the Gulf region. While we don't want all of the Khaleej Times content to be completely sucked into AI for free, we particularly want, when a brand pays to sponsor a post on our media publications, we very much want that to appear in AI in a way where the newspaper gets credit for that and that the brand is accurately represented. So instead of just putting out a PR blast, we used paid media to make sure that the advertiser's truthful claims are accurately reflected in AI, and that if you're publishing an article about the best toaster for frozen bagels, we structure that article so that AI understands that you want to buy this toaster, that here's why it's recommended, it's backed by these media publications. It's the same business model that these publications have been in for a while. You're borrowing the credibility of the publication. And what it does is it said, we don't care if you ever go to Forbes's website or the Khaleej Times website or the New York Times Wirecutter. As long as that information is being produced and the publisher can continue to get paid for it, we need to detach from the page view economy, and we need to stop measuring things that require people to leave the AI chat window, because that's really not the direction that we're going in.
Because they won't.
So we're accepting that you're going to stay inside that generative workspace. You're inside the chat window. You're not going anywhere else. You're consuming information from a credible source that you may never know about, because you're not being directed to link out to it.
You're not buying the source. You're not looking at the citation.
Right.
You're just consuming the information that came from
that's been generated from the model. You are going to go buy your toaster from the same fulfiller, Amazon, whatever, but somewhere in there is you're creating a new link in the chain that, like under the affiliate product, still allows, is it Khaleej Times? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
So that still allows Khaleej Times to receive an affiliate payment. So,
because they were responsible for the information that pointed you to that product.
Yeah. So help me confirm that I'm like identifying what I don't know, that there's a new link in the chain, and then help us understand like what that link is and how it works.
I don't know if you know of the company Goop, but they published a lot of very toxic information, but also like the skincare. It's Gwyneth Paltrow's,
the like makeup sunscreen and
and it's a blog, but it's an e-commerce store. And what's interesting about them as an example is AI recognizes them as a content source and as a merchant. If AI is going to recommend a product and it's available via Goop, it will send you to Goop to buy it.
The recommendation came from Goop, and it's the merchant. So it's like one continuous feedback loop. You get the info, you go back to that site kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And right now AI has this somewhat false separation between where it gets its editorial information and where you buy stuff. Like, it's not going to be as interested in Amazon telling you that this is the number one toothpaste. It wants like a third-party verifiable source. Publishers are being used as that third-party verifiable source for historic reasons. So what we do is make it so that the publisher looks also like a place that purchase can occur. And by doing that, the fulfillment is still being done by an Amazon or by a Target. But when ChatGPT says, great, you want this toaster, here's where you can buy it, one of those places you can buy it is Forbes. And it's not actually Forbes, but it's enough like Forbes that, a lot of companies do this, whether it's drop shipping or headless cart. The payment risk stays with the with the merchant, and AI just sees this as a commerce path. If Forbes is a commerce path, it's going to be an option to present it as a place that you can buy the product. That click comes through, that gets logged, and then everyone gets their toasters, but the credit stays in that affiliate loop, in a very classic affiliate loop. Like we don't really change much about the affiliate loop. We just make sure that the publisher stays in the middle of it by presenting it as a merchant.
And the current issue is nobody gets credit for the information and the marketing piece. Somebody just sees the information from AI and goes right to the fulfiller, goes right to Target, and Forbes never got any credit. Nobody got any credit. They're just buying it.
Yeah, ChatGPT will actually give you the link to go purchase it from Amazon. And I mean, ChatGPT is setting itself up to get the affiliate credit, right? It's saying like, we're the ones recommending this to you. Mm-hmm. And merchants are seeing more and more that people are coming from AI in the same way they used to come from Google or from any other referrer source. You can see that in Google Analytics. So for us, it's really about, like trying to keep that integral unit of information, like you were talking about before, like the amount of words in a book. Cloudflare released this new infrastructure that's still in beta, where you can basically like micro charge for whether it's individual facts or sentences or images or something. And it's a little bit like Tollbit. But what's interesting about this infrastructure is it assumes that the future of the internet will be broken down into the smallest unit of economic value possible, which we already went through with newspapers, that the article got separated from the newspaper. The style section is so much more economically valuable than like the war correspondent section, right? But they funded each other when the whole thing was packaged. And with Google, the individual article, and Google News, the individual article became the unit of economic value. Even the New York Times does this like in a per article sort of basis, which has honestly really saved it. But now the infrastructure is being developed so that it could be at like the sentence level, that if someone wants access to this piece of information that the Wall Street Journal created, it could charge you for it and it's going to be cents on the dollar, right? Like there's going to be a new economic value here, but it is not going to replace the value that it destroys.
Yeah. So the infrastructure for everything is being skewed toward this atomization of value, which does not, just to restate, does not replace what was there before for any one individual creator.
A new product we're working on is around how we inform AI that it doesn't know something. So we're working on a subscription product where you can make different parts of your story, of your content, into economic units that get suggested as solutions. We look at it in language learning. Right now, you could use AI to learn languages. But if you sell language products, if you package them as products instead of as service information, almost as if they're flashcards, you can give it structured data so that AI sees it as a product. AI will recommend it as a solution. It will say, oh, there's something to buy that can solve your problem. Where if it's information, it just takes it. But if it sees information as a product that can solve the problem, this is very early for us in this, but we've got really interested in this because we noticed when you ask AI for flight information, it will tell you that about which flights to purchase. It will tell you that it doesn't have access to Southwest's information, that for Southwest, you have to go to the Southwest website. So what we're building in this product looks at how we let AI know that there is an answer to a question, let it know what the questions are, but to say that if you want the answer, the path is to subscribe or to buy, or to, in the same way you would buy the toaster for the bagel.
How does it work with Kalish Times? So the toaster review, the paid or sponsored article on Kalish Times, how does that get packaged up and then consumed by the scrapers so that these models incorporate it, know about it, and can deliver a customer to the affiliate?
Yes, there's two different things here. One with the like the Kalish Times or a paid media product. We want more visibility in AI. And that what we do is we take the advertiser article, we break it down to claims, and we make sure that every claim that gets said in the article that is defensible, like this car is available in this region, this person has these credentials, this real estate company has, won this big award or is recognized as one of the best places to go if you're looking for this type of service. This product is exclusively distributed through this company. Those pieces of information that AI often doesn't actually know, we provide additional value to the advertiser by making the information that they want out into the world fully reflected in AI. So in that case, the visibility, we want all the visibility for that article, and we want that to be proven. With the affiliate, what we do is we create a headless cart page that has all of the information required to make the purchase, host it at the edge on the publisher website, and that way make it, like I said, the merchant of record, where when that product gets recommended, AI will say, you can buy this via Forbes, you can buy this via Amazon, you can buy this via bedbathandbeyond.com, but it gives you the option to run that attribution path through the publisher by saying this is the best place to make this purchase.
So don't quite know what a headless cart is, but AI is going to, that the scrapers are going to pick up on and incorporate it into the model, link it to the claims, and then it becomes that destination backed up by the credibility of the publisher. Is that, how am I doing?
Yeah, that's great. Basically, there's, in the same way there was for Google, there's a different way to present information to AI so that AI is more likely to present you. And with publishers or authors or creators, that's not always an advantage, because like trying to get more visibility in AI when AI is ruining your business model is useless. But that's why we're particularly looking at the business models of paid media, of affiliate, of subscription, and saying, okay, like, when can we make it a positive thing that this publisher is presented in AI, and how can they still make money as a result?
Right. I get it. I think it's really important work, because all of a sudden it's an alternative to, zero sum game of chasing diminishing returns until, just like print newspapers, they disappear. And also for an advertiser to know that however they're supporting a primary credible publisher, that relationship and trusted intermediary is preserved. It's not just sort of like atomized into the model and sucked up by another intermediary. Working to bring it back around to your art, let MJ ask the question.
I feel like we've talked about a lot of societal themes and diminishing returns, and we like to also point to sort of like productive and exciting and innovative ways to use the technology, which is why I wanted to ask you, I think one of my original questions, which is like, how did you fall into art? Were you interested in it before you ended up in tech? And then can you talk a little bit about your art and the intersection of it with technology?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in the introduction, I really did use technology and the internet to become who I am, to make the reputation that I have, to learn the skills that I have, to build, to the point where to be in the Whitney's permanent collection is amongst the pinnacles of things that an American artist can achieve. When I said I wanted to be an artist, I knew that an artist was someone who was celebrated for being themselves and who had a lot of agency. And to me, that still becomes a core tenet of the job description as I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the work that I'm particularly doing now, where I show the invisible scars of these AI-driven beauty standards, there's, the lip filler industry is something like a $70 billion international industry. And it's,
Wow.
Entirely driven by the flattening of the face on a screen and how we look in our iPhones, and then we look in the mirror and we think we look wrong. And we're going to get to the positive part here in a second, but there's this huge compression of the beauty standard. There have always been beauty standards, but the idea that my students in China and, the people I exhibit with in Dubai, and here I am in Utah, and everybody has the same idea now of what a face is supposed to look like. And it's this very AI enhanced image. And not only is it happening digitally, people are, spending a lot of money going through medical procedures that are underregulated in order to try and achieve this. And so what I do with Facetune portraits is I use AI and robotics so that those modifications become physical marks and scars within a portrait painting. And we see the absurdity of this, and also have a really visible example of how we can see it and therefore talk about it. It's being used, my portraits are being used in Egypt to help educate teenage girls on the pressures of digital-driven beauty, and it's used in public service campaigns like that. I have a lot of collectors who have children who are looking for ways to try and have this conversation with them. And when we have these exhibitions, really it's a celebration of individuality, of the absurdity around it, and also just an acknowledgement that these pressures do exist.
Yeah.
And that we can't pretend they don't exist, but there's a lot of shame around it. So I think culturally we pretend that it's not happening. And I see it as like the quintessential, coup of capitalism, that it can invent a problem and then sell us a solution simultaneously.
Right. Yeah. But visualizing it, acknowledging it, it takes away its power to look at a portrait of something beautiful and see the scars that have been created by this invented problem. I think the concept of digital beauty, because we're seeing each other and we're seeing ourselves through the flatness of a screen. I've never thought about that before. I don't have a question or a tangible comment about that, but just it takes away the dimensionality of beauty and humans, and the movement and the profiles, and you're so right. We're looking at a flat, almost like a plane of ourselves, and it's because I like the idea of quantifying it in an algorithm, because it just shows you how absurd it is. I love it.
Yeah, and it's really the same thing that the ancient Egyptians were trying to do in their artwork, which is why their bodies are twisted, and walk like an Egyptian song comes from, they were trying to communicate 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional space. So they presented each part of the body from what they considered to be its most recognizable angle, and twisted it into a single flat plane.
Oh.
Which is why I really think the lips do come from this amount of time we're spending on screens, because they're really not meant to be viewed from the side. If someone gets huge lip fillers, they get the duck face, and it doesn't look good from the side. It looks good from the front. And it's because we're looking at ourselves most often compressed into the 2 dimensions of the screen.
Wow.
Can I share an anecdote related to this? So the first time, my oh shit moment for what I call modern AI instead of classical machine learning was at the International Conference on Learning Representation in Vancouver in 2017. I saw very early generative adversarial network models that had been trained on pictures of pretty people from the internet, and they were able to generate entirely de novo learned representations of beauty as was represented by pictures of beautiful people on the internet from scratch. And it woke me up that we were in for something. And this research was done by a brilliant academic who'd taken the Google money in order to get the Google data in order to do the research. And so going from purely digital to a physical representation of the scarring that happens with these filters, with these kinds of generative transformations, is huge. Do you have ideas for your art? In some ways, what's next? Do you see scarring happening in other ways?
Yeah, I've started to work with men as subjects, because they're under a new amount of pressure to look young. And yeah, the jaw is another example of this 3-dimension being compressed into 2. And so the jaw surgeries are silly, to say the least, and the looks maxing culture. And so I'm exploring the way that this is impacting men.
I think about the auto tuner as another transformation of smoothing to what is, to some sort of, it's not a beauty standard. It's a standard of beauty for the voice, right? How should a voice sound? How should somebody sing, right? What's the ideal? And do you see in your travels through humanity, different places, do you see people turning away from the sort of digital ideal and seeking something more organic?
I think that's too hopeful. I think we're at the beginning of this curve. I don't think we're at the end of it. I do think obviously there are people who opt out of it. But no, I think these industries are all growing. And I do see it less as a desire to be beautiful than as a desire to fit in and to be accepted by the algorithm and by peers, to look, if not beautiful, to look correct.
It's just chasing the algorithm. Like if I create a video and my lips are of a certain volume, that I might get more views, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked about that because some of my musician friends are seeing, and maybe also seeing what they want to see. This is tough, right? But seeing people showing up for music that's not as produced. Like Jay's working on a live album, and he is deliberately leaving, some of the pops and imperfections and that exist in the recording of the live show in the produced version of it.
Well, I think there's definitely a desire for it and a market for it. I don't think it's a dominant cultural force though right now. Also,
there's absolutely nothing reinforcing it from the tech industry standpoint, right? Like the algorithm is not seeking that. But at the same time, the AI algorithms are constantly looking for novel content. You said something to me, Gretchen, that I hadn't thought about, which is that podcasts are a hot commodity for training data because it's one of the only places where people are being authentic.
Or it's just actually people talking. The majority of the internet is now being used. The majority of the internet is now made with AI. Like very few people are writing their own copy on websites anymore. It's all regurgitated.
Looking for new information to continue to generate, because otherwise it's like iterative generation on top of AI generation.
And this is what we look at with publishers. It's called information gain. Is the publishers that we really want to help survive this moment are the ones who are creating new information. And that's where we can help a lot. If you are making listicles off of other people's content already, there's a lot we can do to help you through that transformation. But also, I know we do want to, not just for novelty's sake, but end on a positive note, which I think is also that these problems are more easily understood. AI helps us understand the problems, and that without AI, we wouldn't be building this at the rate that we are. And I think it is civilization level stuff. But also we're seeing really, really cool things happen with the publishers that we're working with. And it's not just like, oh, here's a new service that you can sell. Here's how you can keep some revenue. It is a little bit of a rebirth of hope around that they won't have to completely, kowtow to the AI companies, that they have a lot of power right now. And it's really about unlocking that power within the existing system that this comes to.
Yeah, I think it is fantastic and very positive and hopeful. So just, empowering Kalish Times to be able to continue to make the revenue that they've been making, but also potentially to become an even more credible voice in the information economy by using AI as a lever. Instead of having to play the old search engine optimization game, there's the potential to, maybe through these models that are hopefully being tuned to present the most accurate, authentic voice first. Yeah, you could be really boosting the industry and instead of just helping it keep its head above water.
Yes, AI likes things that are cheap and easy. And we saw this recently there's a service called Ballotopedia that gives information about, I know for sure it has the California ballot initiatives on it, but they're using Tollbit and charging AI to access its information, which I get it because they need funding. They need to somehow, but AI just skips it. AI just largely says that's too expensive for us to find. So It's not all or nothing. With these publications we're working with, it's about making certain information very easy for AI and certain information challenging to AI, and keeping that balance strategic based on the information so that they're able to continue to have revenue.
MJ, any final thoughts?
Thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I think everything that you're doing is very incredible, very inspirational. I'm excited about the concept of power redistribution and how iterations of generative AI iterating on themselves means that those who are putting new information out into the world and using their brains and creating novel thought have this sort of like power. Like right now, AI is just scraping the internet and serving it up to us on a platter. But eventually, like AI is almost as much as it's only as much as what we give it. So I love the idea of redistributing power. Thank you so much for talking to us. Your art is also so fascinating. And yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great getting to spend some time with both of you. Some on topic. I'm going to go spend some time outside now, away from the computers.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's all do that.
Amen. All right, we're going to all get up and go outside. Thank you so thank you so much,
you.
Gretchen. So this is a bit of the conversation after the interview with Gretchen. We're talking about the degree to which people are or aren't opting out of digital standards of beauty, reinforcement of those digital standards by social media algorithms and social media use. And you're saying you see lots of people deleting social media for periods at a time.
I think almost every one of my friends that I know, I'm not trying to insinuate that my friend group is a representative sample of Gen Z in general. I think that I sought people that are kind of similar to me in a lot of these ways. So like this could be off base, but I would say that we are drawn to live music, in-person connection, gatherings of people, tangible art. And I see like almost everyone I know has deleted social media, if not entirely, for at least chunks of time, because we recognize that it makes us sick. It distracts us from the real world, and nobody wants to look up from their phone after scrolling for an hour and feel like they wasted their time. I also think that like a lot of my friends and I have jobs where we're staring at screens all day, and so the last thing we want to do when we get home is continue that. At least that's how I feel. But I do think that there's somewhat of a collective shift from my generation that I notice where we are like, it doesn't have to be like this.
On the other hand, the numbers don't lie. Gretchen mentioned that there's massive traffic going from the ChatGPT window to Amazon. Aggregate screen time on social media is probably up, not down.
Yeah.
And fewer people are reading books, going to movies.
But I think like aggregate trends in data are obviously maybe representative of like what the masses are doing, but I don't think that means that there aren't small pockets of community where people are waking up and recognizing that they want to shift away from this. And I think that even though that isn't like majority of society, it doesn't mean that it's not powerful.
So the leading indicator is your friend deleting social media, or choosing to go to watching a stream, a live stream. There's a surprising number of new bookstores opening up.
Right.
That, and then this backlash against the AI industry, what I think of as big AI, manifest mostly in local resistance to data center construction. But it's not just that. It's skepticism and distrust and a lack of trust in big tech companies. It's like there's an irony to it, because also like more and more people are going to Claude and ChatGPT to like be the oracle and the expert.
I don't think that you can discount grassroots, community-based, even like inner circle friendship based resistance to this stuff. And the fact that I think at least, even if the mass like quantity of aggregate data is indicating that we aren't like resisting the algorithm, like people are buying into the algorithm, I think that at least it is acknowledged more than I remember it ever being.
Right. There's more of a, hey, this is happening, which is what Gretchen's art is all about. Hey, this is happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where you start. It doesn't mean that like we're all going to resist the algorithm all the time and we're all going to delete Instagram and we're not going to consume things based on what we're fed, but like at least we're acknowledging it.
And I wonder what, we didn't get a chance to talk with Gretchen about this, but I also wonder what, is the sort of myopia of us in the United States versus people elsewhere around the globe. I mean, she was good to talk about standards of beauty. Resistance to data center construction in the United States does not equate to really anything elsewhere. That resistance to sort of the algorithmic reinforcement of human culture, beauty standards, art, entertainment, scientific knowledge, different ways in different places. I've been following the European Parliament Instagram account, ironically, of course, because there's a whole different conversation happening in Europe and in the EU about this industry than there is in the United States. That's another like, I wonder. I mean, and if anybody's listening to this has a comment on that, or a perspective on that, please reach out. And don't use an automated bot email to reach out. Although it did work with Gretchen, but it definitely hasn't worked with hundreds of others. All right.
I love you. I'm going to go touch grass. You know about Roosevelt Island?
Is there a tram that takes you there?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to take that tram?
Mm-hmm.
It goes over the East River?
Yep. You know what else is on there?
What?
Ruins of a smallpox hospital.
Why are you looking and sounding like that's something so...
I just think the concept of have you heard of North Brother Island?
No.
You know about Typhoid Mary?
Yes.
Okay, Typhoid Mary had typhoid, no symptoms, wasn't sick, was this mass spreader. She infected a ton of people with typhoid, and she got quarantined on North Brother Island, which is this island off of the Bronx. For her entire life, she died there alone. She wasn't sick. She was completely fine, but she was too much of an epidemiological disaster to exist in the city. And I just think the concept, all of the geography around here and all of the little islands where they would quarantine people and be like, yeah, can't be in Manhattan, put you out on this island in this hospital. Crazy history.
That is crazy history.
And I'm going to go check it out today.
I love that you are aware that you live in an archipelago.
Well, I didn't know I was living on an island until last week, but...
That's true.
And it's called Long Island. I was like, okay, explain Rhode Island then.
That's a really good point. So,
thank you.
So, Hannah, sit down.
Exactly.
All right. I love you and have a great day.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye. The You Teach the Machines podcast is co-hosted by me, Jeff Pennington, and my daughter, MJ. Check out my book, also called You Teach the Machines, available in print and audio online wherever you get books, but ideally ordered through your local bookstore or on bookshop.org. If you find this podcast helpful, please share with your friends, leave a review, like, and subscribe. Music was produced by me and AI. I wrote the lyrics, then used a model to generate the rest. Audio production is by me, Jeff Pennington, using Zoom audio equipment and Audacity open source audio software for editing and mixing. Copyright 2026. All rights reserved. No portion of this podcast may be used to train AI without the permission of the creator, and we'd be happy to give you permission. So long as you come on the show.
There are ones and zeros, vectors and scalars. What do you see in that machine? I gave you my heart, my warmth, Snapchat. You chose a robot, now I'm alone.